Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric, and today we are talking about FAFSA and some interdepartment bickering going on as students and the schools that are dependent on this money are left to the side. They are not being provided for, and just another example of government overreach and how when government gets involved in things it has no business doing, it hurts all of us. And so let's jump into this article. One of the former top loan officers, Wayne Johnson, accused the Education Department of malicious negligence in a recent letter written to U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona and other senior officials. Now, if you're not sure what FAFSA is, it's the free application for federal student aid. And so many of us are familiar with this, or if you're homeschooling or have children that are going to be reaching college age, you're probably going to be filling this out in the future. It's kind of a standard document, 99% of Americans fill out. Some of us have realized that the reason that we are $2 trillion in debt is because of the government propping up our failed college system, and that we should, stop filling this out altogether and go about it in other ways. But most of you will experience filling out FAFSA at some point in your life. But right now, there's a lot of issues with this new act. They are saying that they were supposed to make it easier to fill out, make it more streamlined, and that none of this has been done, that it has been ignored, and that this is really making it difficult for students to know whether they're going to be able to pay for college because they're not paying for it themselves, right? They're relying on a government program to pay for it. And the colleges, which aren't really pricing their services in a way for most of us to afford it, are hopeful that these students will get this subsidy from the government, this loan, and will be able to pay for their tuition. So it puts both really parties at risk because of the incompetence inside the government. And I would just say that all three parties want this to work well, but we see the results of it all around us, that when the government gets involved in paying for things or subsidizing things or providing loans for things that they have no business getting involved in, consumer gets hurt. The institutions are really undercut. They are really relying on the federal government or the state government to be competent. And we can see time and time again that this is not the case. And I just like to tie this in with most of us having to have filled this out at some point in our lives or going to fill it out in the future. This is a really microcosm, an example of what we're going to see with all of these ESAs and school choice bills. I was at an event where a conservative who was pushing school choice, also owned a bunch of schools that were going to benefit from it, said, "Thank God that we have private people paying for tuition because the state money that I'm relying on from Florida still hasn't come through." And this was 2 months into the school year where, she was paying for different school teachers and administrators that they had hired based on the state providing them funding. And while the state had allocated funding, they actually hadn't put in a process yet to write the checks and, potential layoffs or, different things happening. So this is just one example of why ESAs and school choice that's funded by the government, by taxpayers, is evil and is going to hurt us long term.
Okay, so to jump in here, the example you're giving kind of makes me think of one of the main reasons we don't want the government involved in as many things. Because in that specific example, I see them being playing the role of judge, jury, and executioner. So, what are you going to do when you're not being paid by the government? Like, what's your recourse? The government's the one holding it up, and the government's the one that you need to complain to make it happen. So, again, a good call for less government intervention in these programs and less government push into these programs. I'm curious if you could use like comparison, because as I'm thinking about FAFSA, and this was one of the big turnoffs for me with going into college, and I didn't want to have to go down this channel of being required to fill out this form in order to go to school. And I was being told like, no, you have to fill this out or you cannot apply to schools. The road to hell is often paved with good intentions, and I'm curious if you could use like some comparison and talk about some other government programs that are similar to this and causing the same sort of liabilities that they were aiming to solve.
Well, I think really almost any government program where they, if they want it, more of it, they subsidize it, and if it's doing well, they tax it. And so, virtually every government program can be like this. You think about like food stamps, and one of the big things that Corey DeAngelis likes to say, he's a school choice proponent that many people have heard of. He's like, well, we've got food stamps and you can use it all over the place. We should make food stamps for education where everyone can use it all over the place. And one, some grocery stores don't take those food stamps. Two, what you can use food stamps for are often dictated by your state or federal government and not always necessarily for healthy food. It's the people who have their hands in the politicians' pockets who get their products subsidized, and other people can't get their products subsidized. I mean, let's think about sugar. Sugar is a great example. Sugar is subsidized in the United States. It's addictive. It's some of the addictive properties are higher than cocaine. And sugar really messes with our system. It makes us more likely to get sick. It makes it more likely that we're obese. And so, a spoonful of sugar might help the medicine go down. But by subsidizing sugar, we now have obesity as an epidemic here in the United States. People complain that you can buy a sugary drink for 99 cents, but a healthy drink's, $3. Well, that's because we're subsidizing that 99-cent drink through taxpayer funding. And so anything that the government is not ordained by God to do for us, which is mostly justice and protection, they fail at. It becomes very expensive. The results are negative, worse than if the government did nothing. And it is just a power play. And so I think comparing most any government program is a good example. When people push back on me saying, well, we don't see any inflation yet on these school programs, we don't see any decline in the product quality yet of these private schools. It's like, for one thing, these schools have only been subsidized for 1 year. It took decades for these negative effects to show themselves in college and then eventually into our public sphere. So it's not something that happens overnight. And secondly, just name one government program that has been successful. I can name thousands that haven't been. So that's where I would look as a individual who prizes freedom. Compare these policies that are being pushed on us by atheists and people who don't believe God exists, and by people who don't share our worldview, telling us that this is good, and compare that to procedures and policies that have already been in place. And I'd like to point out that all three people in this category, the students, the government administrators, and the colleges, all are pro this policy. They are all for this working well. And because it is inherently against what the government should be doing, inherently wrong for the government to be involved in it, that it cannot be successful even when all three groups that benefit from it want it to work well.
So, as we're going through this, I'm thinking that what we're seeing is a large scale lack of rhetorical skills on the part of the government. So, if they went through and, if they had the memory to know how past programs were going and to say, here's what invention we need to take in order to course correct some of these things, they're really good at the delivery and the style and the presentation of all of these policies. But it's in the outset of the creation of a lot of these policies, they're not addressing and assessing what are the failure points that we're going to run into, and so we end up in the same spot over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't have a sound biblical worldview. They don't, even most of these people run on a particular policy or, have a reason to run. They don't necessarily have a coherent worldview. They say they're conservative or they're progressive or, whatever their flavor is, but it's inconsistent and incoherent. And therefore, we get public policy that's inconsistent and incoherent, which costs the taxpayers more money. The quality of all of our lives go down, and we create systems upon systems that are, not going to be compatible with freedom and will eventually lead to tyranny, economic destruction. Just like every empire has fallen due to just whether it's business or cronyism or the politicians or individual groups stealing from the public coffers. We're now seeing that kind of end game here in the United States where every single group is just trying to steal whatever money is left for themselves and their groups that vote for them in order to remain in power and to keep themselves from the economic harm of these issues that they're creating over and over again that ultimately lead to human depression, this loneliness that we're seeing, these epidemics, these identity issues are all derived from an incoherent worldview.
So I think one of the problems that we're facing as a people is we kind of all subscribe to this idea of ideologies, and those are, I mean, that all stems from French Revolutionary, political philosophy, the ideologues trying to take and instead of applying terms to name the thing, find a name for the thing and then conform the thing to the name. And so we've kind of got everything flipped upside down, where instead of our ethics and our morals and beliefs leading the head and trying to reframe and structure our societies, we've actually flipped it around and said, what is the ideology that I subscribe to? What is the political philosophy that I subscribe to? Instead of acting for working solutions and trying to make things fit where they need to based on the circumstances they have, we just try to take whatever philosophy that we have of how government needs to behave and apply it to each of these sectors. And we're feeling the ramifications all over the place. So what's the solution, Robert?
Yeah, so the solution is to really become anti-fragile ourselves and our community and our family, to be self-reliant, not self-reliant in a selfish way, but in a way that incorporates our reliance on God and our church and our local community and build that up, and not to get ourselves involved in creating structures on sand, structures on government funding, structures on politicians being omnipresent, being able to see all and know all, because that has failed us time and time again. And only when we get local and only when we, embrace the Lord as our provider instead of the government as provider, are we able to put ourselves and our families and our churches in a position where we can rebuild from the incoming rubble, from the fall of yet another empire who got too big and too full of itself, believing itself to be God, for it to be the one that provides all good things to its people. And as we see this coming towards an end, we see this time and time again throughout history. And so be prepared, create yourself and your family a way forward that isn't reliant on the government violence towards your neighbors to get things that you want, but instead create an atmosphere of hard work, building something that will last lifetimes like we used to do in the Western culture with our beautiful cathedrals, and just this idea that we are part of his story and how do we act as Christians in a crumbling empire. And it's not robbing our neighbors to fulfill our own needs. It's preparing for the future. And so that's what we need to do as Christians, is really become anti-fragile ourselves and be prepared for the upcoming catastrophes that are inevitable when we start disobeying God's plan for us and embrace a pagan culture and a pagan plan in government.
Well, that's a bit sobering.
It is, Chris, but the good news is Chris, it can be when we think about our flesh, but while I love being in America and being born here and being a citizen with all of those rights and responsibilities, my ultimate home is in heaven. And there will be no sin, no crying, no hurt. All of our needs will be met by the Lord. And so while we're here, of course, we need to be involved in our country. We need to try to stop us from really jumping off the cliff. I don't know. We might be in midair already. I don't know. But as Christians, we need to remember who we are and where we're going, and that we have a hope that really gives us a peace that passes all understanding. And that's why it's so important that we give our kids a classical Christian education with a strong community so that whatever happens around us, that we have one another to create a anti-fragile culture that can rebuild. Because no matter how bad it gets, when you read the Old Testament and you look through human history, we still got a long ways to go to reach rock bottom. So we can work together to stop that from happening and to rebuild faster than we have in the past, because we can learn from that and continue to look forward to the kingdom of God in heaven and on earth. Until next time, please keep tuning in to Refining Rhetoric. We'd love to hear your opinion on building on the rock versus building on shifting sands. And what do you think? Are we in a spot where we can still save the United States, or are we Sodom and Gomorrah? And we need to consider what we're doing next as Christians. Hello, everyone. I'm hoping that I will see you at our National Events Weekend on May 2nd through 4th, 2024 in sunny Southern Pines, North Carolina. This is being presented by our Classical Conversations Foundation. It is a time for CC families from around the nation to experience 3 days of events and learning about classical education and celebrating the hard work of fellow families on their homeschooling journey. Some of the major events we have are our national conference, where myself and my mom will be speaking, along with other panels such as a grad panel and a dad panel, and you'll hear a lot about the math map. We'll have a national commencement, so if you have a graduating senior, this year we've actually doubled the number of commencements, so we've added a second one so we can allow more people to come and celebrate with us, so be sure to look out for registration for that. And of course, we have the National Memory Master Competition, where one student will win $10,000. And it's such a fun time. And we are going to be opening that up to the public for the first time, so you can sit in and watch it. And it's going to be an exciting time. There's a ton of things on the agenda. We'll have food trucks. We've got camps for your students. So if you're a Classical Conversations family, we are encouraging you to come May 2nd through 4th, 2024. Registration is going to open on November 1st, and you can learn more by going to classicalconversationsfoundation.org today. And again, that website is classicalconversationsfoundation.org to get your tickets, and we'll see your family there.
Hello and welcome to Classical Crypto with Will today. It's just such a pleasure to speak with you. It is April now. I can't believe we're into the fourth month of the year. Unbelievable. Happy Easter. Hope it was a wonderful one. Okay, quick couple bits of crypto information today. First of all, we have Sam Bankman-Fried finally sentenced officially by a judge to prison for 25 years. Now, Sam Bankman-Fried is the founder of FTX. I'm sure you were hearing about that in the news. It was definitely global news when it came out about the fraud that was happening and how he scammed literally hundreds of millions of dollars away from investors, taking their money, telling them he was investing it on their behalf in one asset when in fact he was making bets and investing that money in other places, and just showing on paper that he was investing their funds where they intended it to go. That's how you break it down to into simple terms. But huge fraud case. I think there were 110 allegations, and he was finally sentenced. They said he finally seemed to take his sentence like he deserved it. I guess in the previous hearings, he had been pretty defiant, like he was being treated unfairly after this all went down. But now it seems like he has accepted his fate. He is sorry, and boy, he's going to pay for it for a couple decades in the clink. So that is Sam Bankman-Fried. Interesting. That's where we're sitting there. Boy, he's missing the bull run, though. Things are still heating up, though Bitcoin really never broke past 70K here last March. So we kind of been sitting in the month of March between 60, 70. It's been bouncing around today. At beginning of April, it's around 65,000. So really interesting to watch that price action. It really was, ETF really kind of shot us into cyber space, and now we're kind of drifting down a little bit. I think it's healthy that the market has this correction, this cooling down, because if it does and it's healthy, then it could perhaps have another leg up. So hopefully that will happen. In other news, Cathie Wood, founder of ARK Investments, is really breaking down Bitcoin, and she is going, dang, Larry Fink, all these other asset managers, the cues she's seen on Wall Street are showing her that really everything's going to be tokenized. Deeds, trusts, contracts, all of that. So she has raised her new price prediction for Bitcoin to $1 million a coin by 2030. And I think that Bitcoin for her signals a broader version, a broader picture of the financial climate or the tokenization climate in America. And I think she's kind of using Bitcoin to say, hey, Bitcoin can grow here. AI is going to grow to here. Tokenization is going to grow here. We're definitely transitioning from that Web 2 to Web 3 world. So it should be a cue, a signal, a light, if you will, lantern in the night to the rest of the world to go, hey, the big guys, this is where we're going. Things are changing. Get on board now. And now with Larry Fink and 401ks and everyone buying into this narrative a little bit more, Wall Street buying into it, it's going to be really interesting as institutions start moving this direction, upgrading their technology. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. But the main two pieces of news, Cathie Wood, major announcement, and Sam Bankman-Fried sentenced for 25 years. Bitcoin hovering around 70K. Looks like we're about to hit another Elliott wave and probably land around, I think 87 would be the next spot on the chart. So stay tuned, be well, and tune in to the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.